they also have graves. They have they know that they need to bring their dead to a certain
Oh, I didn't know
area or else disease will spread. They know that.
Dang, I didn't know that. That was pretty cool.
Yes, so you can look into it. They know there's like a certain they emit a certain chemical, and they say, "Hey, this ant is dead. We need to bring him to the graveyard." Because they understand that if you just have dead laying around, it will spread disease. Somehow they know that.
Wow.
That's
They're
pretty
born knowing that. They're born knowing that, and humans have to learn that. If you just had like a human and didn't tell him anything, right? You could you would they would just leave the dead body there. They wouldn't understand. But for some reason, ants are born with like that knowledge. Like they know.
Welcome back to the Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, Jose, your host, get to talk about out of the box ideas. This is really a channel that talks about different topics from philosophy, psychology to music, arts. We really like to touch upon different topics, and we like to nitpick and take out truths from different subjects to connect them all and bring them together in this podcast. And so today we are actually really excited because we have an amazing guest. It's actually a family member of Steele's. So Steele, if you want to present your relative and just let us know a little bit about him.
Yeah, so James is my nephew, and then we hang out every now and again. And he was down here, so I figured, hey, and kind of wanted to come on the podcast. So I was like, hey, why not? That'd be awesome. So yeah, is there anything like you want to add about yourself, James? That
Um, That I would like to say that I don't know if I'm up to the levels you guys are, but I'll do my best to keep up. We'll just have to see how it goes.
all right? Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
curious to see how it's
Yeah.
going to turn
Yeah. So we came to talk specifically about IQ, if creativity correlates with IQ, if it's a sign of somebody's intellectual abilities. Um, and I know Jordan Peterson talks a lot about that, how sometimes in companies it's harder to move people up into the creative ladders. But I think that maybe there's also other aspects that help people move up, like emotional intelligence, other than just intellectual. Um, but just wanted to touch upon that sort of thing, and also another topic regarding IQ. Also, if having a rough upbringing can also determine level IQ that you have, just because maybe you have to be a little bit more street smart, if you have to be a bit more on your feet, and or even maybe more independent. And so you just develop natural abilities faster or better. And so without further ado, I just really leave it open for you guys to just kind of put in any input. I know James was mentioning a little bit about that in regards to how sometimes he's noticed that people with rough upbringings or who have been adopted have come to be very smart human beings. And so that's very interesting that you say that, James. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I've noticed it because I was talking to Steele about it, and we talked about it, and we're like, well, I forgot like exactly what we said,
out.
but it was like mentioned that me and Steele kind of have similar upbringings, and that where our lives are pretty rough, and that we both seem to be pretty intelligent, and I guess that's like where it came from.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're
And
like, who else is
yeah,
like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
you mentioned a philosopher, or was it an inventor that had a similar
Yeah,
situation?
polymath. Yeah, exactly.
Polymath.
Leonardo da Vinci. He was
Yeah.
adopted. Yeah, he was adopted. And then also we talked about Steve Jobs, how Steve Jobs was adopted and became really successful. And what I had brought up when we were talking about that was there's something said about Steve Jobs. It was in the movie, and it's kind of like this theory that's kind of interesting. Like, well, maybe Steve Jobs wanted to prove his biological parents wrong by working his hardest in life.
Mm,
And so that's why he was so
yeah.
successful, because unconsciously, when a child is adopted or their birth parents reject them, even if they didn't witness it, there might be this unconscious belief formed in their brain that like birth parents didn't want them, that they weren't wanted, they weren't loved, that they have to prove something. And so what do you do if you don't feel like you're loved by the people who gave birth to you? Then you try to prove something to
To
your
the world.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was kind of where that came from.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. And it seems like whenever you're growing up kind of rough, you might not be as socially inept as a bunch of other kids. So you could be put down and kind of bullied. And maybe that's like another thing that pushes you to like try to prove people that you can be something.
Definitely that happened to me quite a bit. I mean, I went through some bullying myself, and I feel like it did kind of lead to that, like maybe more social isolation and trying to prove something to those who
What if social isolation leads to higher intelligence, maybe?
Mm.
More like time with yourself and your own thoughts,
yeah,
could have
because
a correlation.
Yeah.
what are you doing when you're alone? You're focusing more on learning
Just
things.
thinking about your like own thoughts and like a lot
Yeah.
of the times I don't really have anybody to talk to, so I'm just in my room thinking about things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's very interesting that you say that, because um you kind of block out the sound from the world and all the noise that is being bombarded. And so that allows you to connect to maybe what some people might say, a higher intelligence, or, just the thoughts that are coming through our mind. And it gives us an opportunity to actually create and to actually formulate thoughts, ask questions, right? Because I always find it very fascinating that people haven't asked themselves big questions like the meaning of life. And I think that's why I'm so grateful that I've studied a little bit of philosophy in school, and just like talking to people, because I think that opened my perspective to say like, whoa, this is actually what might be necessary for human development, or maybe even more intelligent human development.
yeah. And the thing I do want to share with y'all is like we're not just saying this. Like James found a really cool article. I'm gonna share my screen.
Mm.
Let me actually separate this real quick from my window. That way it doesn't show confidential information. Okay, minimize that for my job. All right. So we have share this again. So I'm going to share a few articles that I found.
Yeah.
Now, these aren't like research based articles, they're just standard internet articles. So y'all see this? Is it popping up?
Mm.
Yeah, so James found
Wow.
this article that kids who are adopted might have a boost in IQ. And so
Mm.
the thing I learned in grad school with advanced research methods is you got to be careful with these articles because they'll take things out of proportion, and sometimes they're not adept at fully reading the scientific article at its roots and really fully, and sometimes they'll exaggerate things. So I would just take it with a grain of salt, but at the same time, it is interesting when you're putting out this result right here that adopted siblings compared to other siblings had an IQ score of 4.4 points higher than siblings who were raised by biological parents. And it talks about, well, it seems like it's a small difference, but it could affect significant things like risk perception, accidents, and productivity. And so I mean, there's a difference there. There's a little bit of a difference, right? And so
Mm.
then you look at this, famous people who are adopted: Babe Ruth, Eleanor Roosevelt, Steve Jobs, Melissa Gilbert. I don't know that. I don't know all these people. But you can see what I mean. Like, there's some famous people in here. Edgar Allan Poe. I didn't know that. And
Wow.
then we were talking about bullying earlier. So famous people who are bullied. So Rihanna. I know Eminem also was pretty badly bullied too, and he is now a famous rapper. Elon Musk.
Mm.
So, oh yeah, there's Eminem. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's really interesting. So there seems to be this pattern.
Yeah. And I think that that's so interesting, because even myself, like, um in my situation of like my parents having come from Mexico, and I'm trying, like, I'm the oldest of the family, and it's almost like that internal pressure of like, hey, you have to almost do your best to like make your parents' efforts like fruitful, kind of deal, and it's almost like that internal like, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna show them off. Like, I'm gonna be the best. And I think that I wasn't necessarily the smartest, but I, through my diligence, I was able to outperform, right? And so I think that even people who, like you've mentioned, of famous people, maybe they're not the smartest, but they outperform because they had a motivation to prove something to the world, right? To prove, and that drove them to learn more, and which, you know, made them more intelligent in a way, or knowledgeable, is the word. And then in a way, once they apply that knowledge, becomes intelligence, right? And so they increase their intelligence through applied discipline, learning. And so I think that that certainly sounds like a right thought.
Yeah, that's
When
at
you,
least that's been kind of my mindset of like you said, trying to prove something, trying to prove the people wrong that didn't believe in me, the people that doubted me, whether it was the bullies or even trying to think if there's any teachers at school. But there's certain times in my life when I was a child growing up where people doubted me or didn't believe in me, and I was like, no, I'm gonna prove you wrong. And there's
Mhm.
always this thing in me where I felt the need to try my hardest for whatever reason that might be. And so I kind of want to go to James and see if you can relate to that or if there's
Of
someone.
course, yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. And I feel like maybe people who are bullied and like we're criticized, that's what it is. We're facing criticism. And
Mm,
whether those things actually have a basis or not is like whatever up for debate, right? So like if somebody points out a flaw in you, like whenever you're being bullied, people like to try to find flaws in you and like bully you about that, right? Well, maybe that like people's criticizing if you're wrong so makes you more like what's the word, motivated to find things that are wrong and fix
yeah.
them. So I feel like people who are bullied often become successful because they're more like self-critical. Do you understand, like, does that make sense?
Self-critical,
Yeah.
yeah, because if you're self-critical,
They
you're
become more self-aware
Yes, exactly, it
earlier in
makes you more
life.
self-aware earlier in life.
yeah,
Yeah,
Exactly.
that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that pushes you to try harder because you're like, if I'm self-critical, I'm gonna work harder because people
To
who
be a
aren't
better person, to improve those things that they bully you about,
exactly because
because
what happens,
after a while you're not going to have anything to like bully you for. You're trying to, fight
right?
against those things.
mm,
Exactly, yeah, and
yeah.
what
Maybe that's why there's such a big movement of personal development, right? Because you know we live in such a cyber world where people were so constantly bullied that you know the contrary is personal development, right? To kind of outgrow those areas where people were bullied. Maybe people were, you know, physically not fit, and so they become fit so that they can tell people don't have to bully them anymore for their
Exactly.
physical appearance.
yeah, well, and what happens when someone's not self-critical? Well, what does that lead to?
Like, yeah, absolutely. Do like people, I guess, like it's kind of weird because I guess the people who were doing the bullying and kind of fit in, they're kind of at a disadvantage because people will ignore the things, like they won't be as critical. Of course, their friends won't be as critical on them. So I guess they never really learn that they have things that they need to improve on.
Mm,
And they don't get to have that opportunity that people like us who are bullied, like we're more self-critical. And I don't think like I don't even, sorry, I'm not used to talking, but yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know where I
yeah,
was going with that. You don't, kind of see what I'm trying to say, right?
yeah, definitely. Like, you know, some people might not, you know, be aware of their flaws until later on, and so maybe it could be even uh, parental, like um, aspects that parents tell them that they're great and amazing, and then they realize they hit the real world after maybe high school or college or whoever knows when, and then they realize like, oh, I'm not as amazing as my parents said I was, and I didn't work out these flaws that I had. Now I have to make up for it, kind of deal. And so I think sometimes I think it could also be like peers, like teachers that see like, hey, you're not coming to class, or like just like authority figures around your life that are making sure that you're sharpening yourself, right?
Mhm.
And so if people are not asking themselves the questions, and if their peers are not asking them to improve, then they just do whatever they do and never ask.
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we were saying about how there's like an external motivation sometimes that drives people to just outgrow the competition, right? Or once like fellow classmates or whatever that might be. And so I think that certainly does become an aspect. And of course, not asking one's questions. I think we were mentioning something about people who are not self-critical, right? And what could that be due to? Because I think that might be one of the pandemics, right? Like we're talking about pandemics, like that could be one of the pandemics that people nowadays are not asking themselves questions, and that can lead to a non-democratic community of people, because if they don't know and they don't ask, and so they just don't vote. And I mean, I know we're not getting into politics, but like I just think about people who are not self-critical, and what could that be due to?
Yeah, why would people not be self-critical? Maybe it's, look, oftentimes people who have never been bullied before will not be self-critical and will be more prideful, less humble, less humility. So I don't know, like,
Yeah, could be.
yeah, and
Yeah, I mean, there's always that cartoon, right, where the jock is like, an airhead and cannot, think for himself. It's not smart or something like that. And
yeah, that's a stereotype,
I
right?
do
the
I do
stereotype,
think that, yeah,
yeah.
of course. Yeah, that is like a stereotype with that. And I just wanted to put out like I feel like people who go through those like who are bullied and are self-critical on themselves often do have a lot more humility than things people who have not gone through that. So like the pain that you have to go through with those things could make you have like more empathy for others, because if you've been through a lot more stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
You're more
definitely.
emotionally developed.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I definitely agree. And part of me believes that's what almost maybe played a huge role in what brought me to counseling, to be a counselor. Just I developed empathy from that, I think, just because you start to learn what it feels like to go through emotional pain. So that's kind of
Yes,
where empathy comes
I think so too. Yeah.
from.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I wonder if also like emotional intelligence can lead
Oh,
to like a higher IQ, right? Like
yeah, I
to
think
improving your high IQ.
Of course, I
Because
think it would like improve a certain type of intelligence.
yeah.
I think there's an intelligence that's like social intelligence.
Mm.
I imagine there is.
Yeah,
Now,
because if you're more empathetic, you're willing to hear people out. And
yeah,
then if that is the case, then you're open to learning new things from people that one would normally not be open to talking to, right? And so
Yes.
it's almost like Socrates said, one of the only things that I know is that I know nothing.
yeah,
And what he was saying is that he wasn't discarding like his knowledge, but he was just saying like, hey, I'm speaking my truth. I'm you know doing arguments and creating arguments. But if somebody else comes in and says something that is very logical and very sound and can prove it, then who am I to say that there's no truth in that?
yeah. And I think Socrates was battling with this idea that no one can possibly know everything, and he was
Mm,
making the claim something like wisdom is being able to admit what you don't know, being able to admit that you don't know something. That's humility. And I feel like the opposite of that is not wisdom, because you find, I think we mentioned this, I think we talked about this too, James, like people who are not intelligent think they're intelligent, and then they make boastful claims that are not true.
mm.
Yes, we were
Yeah.
talking about that. I think there's actually this real thing. Hold on. I'm gonna look it up, make sure it's the correct thing. Let's see.
Yeah. While you look that up, I mean, just,
Yes, the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger
oh, yeah.
Kruger.
Mm.
Yeah. That effect. Exactly. I can't even pronounce it. That's a
So
trick.
that's when people like think
Broke.
that they are smart, and so make statements as if they were true, kind of deal.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think, because think about it like this: if you think that, like, if you don't have a high intelligence, it can turn into arrogance. I think arrogance
Yeah,
plays
to substitute for the gap, right?
something like that. Yeah.
Maybe,
Mm.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I'm sure it's more complicated, but
Or maybe if you have a lower intelligence, you kind of oversimplify the world. And like I've noticed that people who are intelligent intelligence often like struggle with like, like understanding the meaning of life, and they
Yeah.
see like an over complexity of how the earth works, and they know how it really works. And people with lower intelligence, they see earth through very simplified eyes. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So they might think they know about everything because they don't know what the earth has to offer, or they don't see everything.
Yeah.
So maybe they make misjudgments like about the world, and
Yeah.
things you were talking about. That was another thing that reminds me, the existential crisis that you have gone through.
Oh yes. When I was a kid growing up, young, like 11 or 12, I would constantly have existential crisis. Like I would have problems in school because of it. Like, what's the point of even working? What's the point of doing
Mm.
my work if we're all just gonna die anyway?
And I've
Like, I've
done
always
that.
had
I've
problems like
done that a
that.
lot too. Like, and I think it's just the higher intelligence makes you overthink reality, and you
Yes.
start overthinking existence, and then you start realizing, well, what is the point really? Because then it gets so complicated, and I feel like most people don't really think about that stuff as much.
Mm.
I've came to peace with like the knowledge that I believe this comes in like philosophy, I think. But for me, I don't believe there truly is a point of life. I just found a way to sort of find peace with that and just acknowledge like, okay, I'm gonna die one day, but I guess since I'm here, I might as well just do something.
Make
Do you
the
know what I
best of
mean?
it. Yeah,
Yeah, just do the best you can do. Even
well,
like
yeah,
it's just an optimistic viewpoint of it.
yeah. You
You
found
know, and what was interesting, now that you mentioned that, the like people who've had the highest like IQs, like I think the man who has like the highest IQ right now is like 300 or something like that in
it was
terms of IQ. Some
I
which
think
you had told me, right?
yeah, it was 200. Yeah,
200. Yeah, that's still a lot. That's still a lot.
Yes.
And so even him, um he's so smart that he works as, I think, a janitor or something like that,
works as a
because people
he works as
couldn't,
a bouncer. Yeah,
yeah, he
yeah,
couldn't socialize with people because he was just so smart that people couldn't relate to him. And what that ended up doing is he's just like isolated to himself. And I think
We talked about that too
even
still.
him
yeah. We did.
has come up with the idea of like a god. And
Yeah,
so I think that is so interesting, talking about purpose and IQ, the correlation between both.
I wonder if he's adopted. That'd be crazy, wouldn't it?
That would be
And yeah, I
crazy.
would.
Actually, oh my, this is important. His name is Richard. Is it Richard Langan? I think. Ah man, I can't remember. Let me see. The smartest. Because I just remembered he was actually physically abused as a child, so he suffered
Mm,
trauma. We were just talking about like people intelligence going through hard times.
yeah.
Yeah. What was? Oh yeah, Langan. What's his first? Christopher Langan. I always forget his first name for some reason. Christopher Langan has an estimated IQ between 195 and 210. And he was described in 1999 as the smartest man in America or in the world, because no one really knows of anyone with that level of IQ. Even Albert Einstein's IQ wasn't that high. I think it was 175. I could be wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, like Jose, you were saying, like Christopher Langan is he just to add more to what you were saying, Jose, just to give more context. He
Yeah.
was at a university and he was so intelligent that he was smarter than all the professors there. So he felt like he wasn't getting any benefit by going to the university. So he just decided to drop out and become a bouncer because he just wanted, I don't know why, maybe he wanted a simpler lifestyle. Who knows what it was. But and he just lives on a simple ranch and he works on his own scientific theories at his ranch and he's published them online. And his main theory is like the idea of God being connected with the whole universe and stuff like that. And so it's just really interesting how that comes into play. I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Do you ever have moments where like there's coincidences that just like it's insane, like how like things that like happen that shouldn't happen, like you'll see numbers that match up and stuff, or like if you meet somebody like later on, and then you talk to them and like you say like, oh, I've been at this place at a certain time, and like it turns out you've like seen each other before but like didn't notice it. Just like crazy coincidences like that kind of make me believe in religion, you know like
Like
Mm,
weird parts where the universe just like lines up.
mm,
It's really, yeah.
I think there have been some times like that, and I noticed more of it in hindsight. And then the psychology training in me wants to argue, because I've heard the argument before that that's just our mind, our brain. And this is coming from me. I'm Christian, I believe in God, but
Of
then I
course.
also try to look at everything as objectively as possible, and I try to look at every single side of the argument. So this is one, that the brain is making an illusion in our brain, that like when we have deja vu, it's some type of malfunction in our brain, and misperceiving. I think there's something like misperceiving time, like our time perception is off by like
Mm,
a millisecond, and our brain interprets that as it's really complicated.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then there's other theories like when we see things in hindsight, then we're more likely to see coincidences. But when we're in the moment of what we thought was in hindsight a coincidence, when we're in the moment, we don't think of it as a coincidence. It's only after in hindsight. And so then psychology argues that that's a bias, and that it could be ourselves just tricking ourselves into wanting to believe that. But I mean, I don't know if that's true. That's just one argument. I want to believe that there's certain things happen for a reason.
mm,
But then I like you, James, like I battle with that because I'm not just like I'm always thinking about all the sides all the time. So like sometimes I do fall into that existential crisis of like, well, that could maybe this is all an illusion, like all these things and all this
mm,
stuff. And but then if you believe in existentialism, if you go to the nihilist route, then at the very least you still have the belief that we create our own meaning. So even if there is no meaning in the universe, then that just means we create our own, and then we follow that meaning. So
Hmm. Interesting.
yeah.
Consciousness is freaking crazy, man.
yeah, we've talked
Like,
about that too. And
yeah, like it's so crazy. Like have you ever like think to yourself like you whenever there's times where you like realize the own limitations of your consciousness, and then you start to question what like if consciousness is even real. Like you look back and you're like did I really do that, or was it was like so like are
yeah,
we in control of
Mm,
our consciousness, or
yeah,
is it
yeah,
just
like,
completely
or
our
was it like a
subconscious?
programming or
exactly.
something?
So
Yes.
many things.
Like you know how ants, I wonder if ants think they do like they have free will.
Yeah, that's.
Mm.
I wish we could talk.
Oh, we talked about
And the
that
thing is,
one.
another thing is like animals might have their own language, right? Ants have their own language. They communicate.
Dolphins do. Dolphins have their own language. They
Mm,
have different dialects. Like
Well,
whales and stuff, they have different accents and stuff.
that's
wow.
crazy, man. And another thing is with memories, we can have false memories implanted without even realizing it. There's an experiment
Yes.
done with hot air balloons, and they made people believe that they went on a vacation in their childhood on a hot air balloon, and the people actually believed that they had done that even though they never had, and they implanted a false memory, and then they started coming up with more details that weren't even told to them by the experimenter, and so that false memory was planted, and then new memories grew around it, even though it never happened. And so that makes you question memory. Like there's something I heard where people look at a
Mm,
picture of themselves in the present moment, or like they're in the present moment. I look at a picture of myself when I was a kid, and my brain connects the dots and creates this timeline of my past memories to that moment, and there's like, well, is that even real? There's like questions about that. Like, is that, or is that just an illusion of my brain? And the other thing with memories is our emotions
Yeah. That's
now
interesting.
actually affect the way we interpret our past memories. If I feel sad now and depressed, I'm more likely to remember all the negative things that happened to me, and even interpret the positive things that happened to me in the past negatively. If I feel happy now, I'm more likely to interpret my past memories in positive ways. Even the negative experiences I went through, I'll be more likely to look at the silver lining. So even like our memories can change with interpretation and stuff like that all the time. So it does make you question consciousness and reality.
yeah,
I think
perception.
so too.
Yeah.
And like
Mm,
I was thinking about it, like maybe we underestimate the intelligence of animals and ants and stuff. Because there's some images and some videos I saw online of there's two colonies of separate species of ants, and they were like lined up in a border. Like the soldiers were lined up, and like one of them was guarding their territory, and the other one was guarding their territory. And it was like they were in a stalemate. They were just defending their areas, but they were in peace. They weren't like battling or anything. They were just standing guard there. I have a picture of it, but I don't know if it would be copyright or anything.
Oh yeah, probably
Uh,
would. Yeah. Articles is
mm,
yes, I'll send it to you still in your
yeah,
messages.
that'd be
I'll show
awesome.
you what I'm talking about. But go ahead and continue what your
Yeah.
conversation was.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting because if we think about previous generations, like our ancestors, you know, our ancestors built the pyramids, built like different systems that nowadays, we don't know how to make or build. Well, maybe the modern man, like who is not necessarily specialized in that area doesn't need to think about it, and so doesn't need to think about like how the sewage system works or how light gets to our house or how internet gets to our house. But I just think about how previous generations, that their innovations and their technology was so interesting, and
It
to
is,
be
yeah.
able to make so many interesting things that today we're still fascinated by.
And we did a podcast for anyone watching. We did a podcast on that with Dr. Teresa Van Hoy from St. Mary's University, talking about the Aztecs culture, I believe, if I remember
Yeah, and the technology.
technology. And that's what that reminds me of. And that's a good point, because people often think people from the past were less intelligent than we are now. Maybe there's some truth to that, but then again, they created some pretty amazing things, and you have to think about that too. And just one thing I wanted to say about the ants. Like, you ever pay attention to ants? I used to study them all the
They're a
time.
lot like humans, right?
When I was in
I agree with you.
kindergarten, when I was in like elementary school on the playground, I would just watch the ants, what they were doing a lot of the time. I would just study them. And it's amazing when we don't stop and think about this, but it's amazing how these are creatures that are tiny compared to us. And they go in like a single file line. They collect pieces of dirt one at a time, bring it back, they dig up and they make these intricate tunnels underground, and then they put the dirt up on a hill and build intricate tunnels in there. I mean, that's kind of complicated if you think about it.
They also have graves. They have they know that like they need to bring their dead to a certain area or else disease will spread. They know that.
Dang, I didn't know that. Is pretty cool.
Yes. So like you can look into it. They know there's like they emit a certain chemical and they say, hey, this ant is dead. We need to bring him to the graveyard because they understand that if you just have dead laying around, it will spread disease. Somehow they know that.
Wow.
They're born knowing that. They're born knowing that, and humans have to learn that. If you just had like a human and didn't tell him anything, right? You could they would just leave the dead body there. They wouldn't understand. But for some reason, ants are born with like that knowledge. Like they know.
That's amazing.
So
And that's how you
they're oversimplified, but like through their oversimplification of how their brain works, it makes them like smarter than us.
Yeah.
yeah. And I just looked it up. Check this out. I mean, like, ants have pheromones and unique body language to communicate, like raising their abdomen, like giving someone, wait, what? Nodding your head, what? Making noises to communicate. So I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's
Yeah. And it's so interesting that these are animals that have survived and can survive many like natural disasters, right? And so it's interesting how you know they're able to do that,
And they're
like
born with this
evolve.
survival knowledge, like they're not taught it. Oh, maybe they are taught it. We just don't know that. Maybe they do have their own like way of
Uh,
sending intelligence to each other. Even like maybe like we don't know it yet, but they teach them they're young. Maybe they're not born with this information, but maybe they have a like some kind of system to like share their information with each other.
yeah, like an educational system that
Maybe,
gets
yeah.
passed from generation to generation. Because if I'm not mistaken, like they grow out of eggs, right? They're also eggs
I think
that
so.
that
Yes.
that hatch. And so I don't know, maybe
It's
there's
weird. Yeah.
like a mating leader that teaches them what they need to do in the world.
And if they're really born with that information, like that in itself is interesting. Why aren't humans like that?
well,
How are some creatures who just like they have like their DNA remembers things?
actually,
And what
I
if humans have that? What
well,
if something like your generations that are sent down, what if like you carry some kind of knowledge subconsciously that others people don't have and it's just
and
based on your heritage?
I think we do
Mm,
to a certain extent. I think because there's some things I learned in psychology of development that there are certain blueprints in our brains. Well, we talked about, me and Jose talked about this, like the critical periods of development. So like if a baby's vision isn't developed correctly, then the vision won't develop. Or like there was a story about this girl who was abused and kept away from other people, and so she never developed the ability to speak. Feral children don't develop the
girl.
ability to speak, and so that part of the brain never develops. But then again, there's specific areas in our brains for each thing: vision, hearing, and like the frontal cortex is all about reasoning, problem solving, the morality. And so why is that? Like, every human has the same brain regions correlated with those functions. So like, we're born with that blueprint, and we're also born with certain things that come from genetics like there's certain things like our physical attributes, obviously, but there are certain things that can be passed down genetically that
Yeah.
like certain instinctual things. And then
Yeah,
there are
because I mean, there's been, even in my family, my mom tells me all the time, like when I was little and I would get stressed, I would grab my ear, right? And I didn't know my uncles did that as well when they get stressed. But it was
Wow.
just like a like something I just started doing. My parents don't do it, so I never saw them do it. And but I started doing it whenever I would be working, and I would just start grabbing my
That is
ear.
really
yeah,
interesting.
that's pretty
And
weird.
I think
so
they
I
did
think
do an
about that
experiment like that.
intellectually too.
Like,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
No,
ahead.
no, no, you're good. You're good.
So I think they actually did. I'm not sure if it was just like a film or something, but I think at one point they did like an experiment where they just had like these children that were just isolated from the rest of the people, and they were not allowed to see another human being.
mm,
Mhm.
Like, so they locked them up in a room from like birth or something, and they would like send them food like and stuff they needed, but for the most part they were isolated from society, and they were trying to understand like what would happen if there was nothing around. Like, what would you become? You know,
Yeah.
nothing to
yeah,
base yourself off of.
yeah. And then philosophy talks about the clean slate of the brain, and like I think it was it Hume or David Hume? No, I don't know. There's some philosopher talking about how our mind is a blank slate and it gets filled with information, filled with things that we learn with the environment and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't
But
know.
that could be a theory, because who else? I mean, I think there's also like genetics, and because if you think about it, I was talking to this with my girlfriend the other day. There'll never ever be another person with the same, DNA matching as you. Like the composition of, like, your genetics is, unless maybe it's twins, but like is going to be, you know it's never going to be replicated ever in history. You're just like one person with your specific DNA matching that will never exist later on, because you will go, and if you have kids, you're going to match your DNA with another human being, and so it's going to continue just like that, and to develop. But what is that to say that maybe like DNA strands from your ancestors are still lingering in your lineage, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so that carries memory, just like water carries memory, right? Like water carries like memory in itself. And so if water can carry memory, and then like what is it to say that our DNA cannot carry memory through generations?
Hmm.
Yeah, well, and there's certain things that are passed down like forever since like because of dangers in our environment. For example, our
Mm,
brain developed the flight or fight response, the stress response, which is part of that involves the amygdala, the center area of our brain. The amygdala is the fear response, or
mm,
it's what creates fear. And so that every human being has an amygdala, right? Unless it's a birth defect or something that I don't know if there is. I don't know if that exists, but that is an example of like fear being an emotion that every human has that we're naturally born with. That's an instinct that we don't have to learn. It's something that's just there, like the ants, it's just there. And the fear response, the stress response, and all of that's
mm.
just there.
Man, this is crazy. There's so much I would like to talk about, but so little time.
Yeah,
You
no.
know,
And same with
like,
emotions too. Like we all have them. We all display emotions with our face too. So
and we
that's
all automatically. But is that a thing that's like if? But another thing with that, maybe that one's not passed down because people from different cultures have different ways of communicating. Like
actually
Indians head nod, and that's like we have different ways of like. Maybe that's something that's passed down, or not passed down, but learned throughout like the social stuff because
yeah.
different cultures have different ways of greeting each other and stuff.
That's
Like
true. There's different social norms and different communication nonverbals in cultures. However, there were studies that showed that emotions, there's like five primary emotions that are consistent cross culturally. Like all cultures share them. I think some of them was like happiness, anger, fear, sadness. I think those are some of them. And even babies show those emotions. Those are like like across every culture, like scientists have found in the study that people show similar facial expressions of fear anger and different things like that. So
Man, that makes me think, man. Like, you know how like Germans have that like the stereotype that they over engineer everything? Like, what if it's a thing that like your intelligence can be based off of like your culture? Like, what if people of certain cultures, like the way they were raised and the way that things work there, what if that can like correlate to like the general intelligence of a certain like nation?
I think so
Yeah,
because
that's
I
yeah, because right now Finland, the way their education system works, and I got to study it when I was in high school, was that they don't have lectures. It's Socratic method, and also their classes, and this is like since like elementary, and their classes there's more electives than subject based classes, and so I think they finish school like around 2, like just like elementary students, and the rest of the day they can just do electives. And so they push their kids to go out and experience the world instead of learn the world through a classroom, right? So it's more like teaching them to like go like do things in the world. And what that has shown is that kids started developing better um like creative levels and just like overall like lifestyle levels, because they were like out and about, not just like stuck in a room just to learn everything. And so I think that's so interesting that the environment can also have an aspect of how one develops. I mean, of course there's like, like the matter that's there, but it's also who molds it that makes it into something even more.
Hmm.
I can definitely see that. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like another subject I wanted to touch on is like the thing with like like the soul, right? I was thinking about it. You know how like
Mm.
there's that saying that energy cannot be created or destroyed. What if that same knowledge like is the same for souls?
I was thinking
You
that
know,
too. I made that connection. I was writing my book about God, and I was thinking that was like when Albert Einstein said that, it made me think about, well, that sounds like the soul, doesn't it? Like
like what if like when you die, the energy from your soul like does not cease to exist?
Remains.
Like
yeah,
what if it goes
exactly.
somewhere? It
Yeah.
has to go somewhere.
I wrote that was a huge section of my book that I was writing about, and I even did an independent study similar to that with my philosophy professor who was on our podcast one time, Eric Chelstrom, and me and him talked a lot about that too, about consciousness. And my argument was always like, well, what if consciousness can exist after death? How can we prove that or disprove it? Like how can we figure this out? Because consciousness, like we've kind of touched on a little bit in here, is extremely complicated, and it doesn't seem to be a physical thing like an organ.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
so yeah, I think what you're talking about, James, that when I think about the soul, I think of consciousness, and I think that if energy cannot be created or destroyed, then maybe that's also what consciousness is, which is the soul, basically.
Yeah, and that's really weird. Like
Yeah, it is
there's, there's so many things as humans we don't have the ability to understand. Like we'll
exactly.
never
Yeah.
understand it, and that's like that. Like it's like so
Until maybe one
disappointing.
day when we become full energy and
Yeah,
You
and are
think?
not matter.
Yes.
Because
yeah.
like those near death experiences that Steele talks
So
about,
I was just thinking,
it's just like crazy how like what people experience in that trance where they say that their body separates, like their soul separates from their body, and they can like see
Ooh.
themselves like in the operation room, and then they go somewhere else, or like something opens like within the room, and then they just like get sucked into it.
There's actually there's a certain chemical that causes that, and it's actually like a psychedelic drug.
DMT,
It's just
yeah, yeah.
DMT.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so there's a theory with that too. Like, well, what if DMT is the stuff that stimulates the pineal gland, the spirit gland, that somehow releases the soul from the body or consciousness from the physical body?
Thing with the pineal gland. Do you believe that like the fluoride in like our water and stuff actually like calcifies it? Like, do you believe in that kind of
I haven't heard that one
stuff?
before, so I have no idea.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's because I heard reading up on it. Fluoride actually doesn't do much for your teeth. Apparently,
Oh, really?
like there's not much research or backing that fluoride protects your teeth, but it does like have an effect on your pineal gland.
Mm.
That is interesting.
And you may like call people crazy who believe in that thing, but keep in mind, like MK Ultra was a real thing that happened.
yeah, and I
You
actually
look
did
up at it.
I did
What is that?
yeah, I did a
Oh,
research paper on MK Ultra for my history class in St. Mary's University.
it's
And
real.
I found a lot of really interesting things. So like the CIA, like they released LSD on a whole town by putting it in their bread, and then the town kind of like went crazy and
The water too. It's real. It's real. Like it's crazy, but like people with all these what are they called? Frick. It starts with a C. They like make up things like
conspiracy theorists.
conspiracy theorists.
Mm.
But the
There's
thing is,
times where like that you wouldn't believe happened. Like the CIA like experimenting on towns without their knowledge.
the thing
Like
is,
stuff like that actually happens.
I did a research paper and I had, because it was a history college level class, I had to find primary sources for that research paper, which means primary sources are the most original source you can find of that historical event, which is like newspapers and stuff like that. And so I found stuff that supported it. So that was crazy. I mean,
That's insane, right? Like it makes you wonder what they're doing to us now. Like what kind
Yeah.
of things are they doing without our knowledge?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I also think about, like how is it that so many people now are becoming gluten intolerant, lactose intolerant, when before it wasn't a thing? Like, what is going on with our food system? Like, what's going on with our
Yeah,
food?
and I also heard that plastic bottles actually decrease testosterone levels, and there have been studies recently that showed that testosterone levels are at their lowest in history among men.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. But it makes you think, what if it's not the plastic bottles? What if that's a cover up? What if it's like a thing by the government to make us more
Yeah,
like
either it's that or it's the plastic bottles. It's one of those, or it's another thing.
yeah,
But yeah, it's
you never
interesting.
know, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jeez.
It's interesting because you would think, like, out of all the people that are in the world, somebody must have thought of it. And what if that person doesn't have the best intentions, right? I mean, our nature
Yes.
is to care and to create societies and civilizations, right? But I mean, there's been people in history that, you know, that have
Completely
wanted
going
to
against that.
cause destruction, right? And what is that? What is there to say that maybe those people still don't exist today?
Of
Maybe
course
what
they
if there's like
exist.
more people with the mindset of, like, maybe Hitler, right? And but that we don't know of, right?
Huh.
Pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Subliminally.
Subliminal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
subliminal.
you know that psychology actually has found that subliminal messages are very effective and they work. And so the government, once they found that out, it was a long time ago this happened. They passed a new law to make subliminal messages illegal.
Wow.
Whoa.
But who knows if they're stopping because they're like milliseconds. So
Yeah.
they're illegal,
'Cause-
but it's not going to
Yeah.
stop.
Because I think about, like, when I go to the gym, there's always like televisions everywhere, right? And what if that's just like programming, like constant programming, of like, hey, eat this, buy this,
What
like
if,
get this.
what if it's in the music we listen to too? Oh,
There's so many. Yes, absolutely. Like, have you seen like the freaking remaining mean time? It's like 4 minutes. Did you notice that?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of,
I've seen some things like certain frequencies emit like can bring certain like reactions out of the brain.
yeah.
Mm.
I've looked into binaural. I've used binaural beats before, and they have an effect on me.
But no, yes,
Maybe it was a
makes you
placebo.
think. What if it's in our music?
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, even in previous generations, there's this thing in music called the tritone, which is two notes that that clash together. And usually in music, it's like about like 6 or 7 half steps in a piano up from one note to the other. And so when you play those two notes, it clashes. And so a lot of people would say that that was the devil's sound.
yes, the devil's tone. I've heard
Yeah,
of
the
that.
devil's. Yeah.
Oh, that's creepy.
And it
So
emits like a certain feeling out of your brain, like out of your emotional system.
yeah, and so that's why they wouldn't play that in church music, because that's where mainly the music flourished in Italy and all those places. It was like usually church musicians that would create music,
They tell
and they would always try to avoid that hitting those notes or creating music that would touch those notes, because it was like devil music or something like that.
that's crazy, man. That's
Talking about frequencies, have you guys ever heard of HARP? HAARP.
Harp.
No, it's the high frequency active auroral research program that the U.S. Navy did.
Wow.
It's like they would send frequencies out into this like to the sky and see if they can control weather, and it actually like works. Yes,
Wow.
seriously, look it up. HAARP right now. Look it up. It's real.
Wow. That's crazy because I've heard of like different conspiracy theories that like in the future like the government is gonna control us through the weather.
They'll like it basically vibrates like it like the air and causes like certain clouds to form and stuff.
So
Like it messes with the
Maybe
water
we-
particles and causes rain in certain areas.
And another thing me and Jose talked about on the podcast was like I found some declassified CIA documents about they were trying to alter the universe's it's like they're using the law of attraction and meditation and affirmations and intentions to change the destiny of the universe for them or something. And there's a really interesting CIA document that was talking about that they were attempting like the idea that the law of attraction, like if we believe in something strong enough, the universe will give it to us. They were trying to do that, and it was kind of
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah,
found results. Some
that
interesting.
can play that honestly, and that backs up religion if you think about it. The whole
Yeah.
praying thing,
Exactly.
That's what we talked
And
about.
that's
all
so
interconnects,
interesting.
dude. Oh my god,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Because
like
I was
so-
thinking like Jesus must have been like a really like intelligent person because he was explaining like scientific things that we're discovering now that back then he just had to say parables and
and
that's
it's
what the
real.
Bible was.
It's
Yeah.
it matches.
and if
Like, it makes sense.
if
Yeah.
Jesus just started talking to people in scientific terms that we use today, which didn't even exist,
Nobody would understand.
even
Yeah.
the terms we use now didn't even exist in the language back then. But if Jesus just started using those words, no one would understand what he's saying at all.
Like
So, of
like
course,
in the
So
yeah,
either
Bible.
he was a
like,
genius or he was actually a higher being.
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And that's what's interesting because like when Steele and I have looked at the Bible, and I know we're like less than a minute, but we've looked at the Bible and we said, well, Adam sounds like an atom, right? And
Yes.
he made Adam from
Oh.
the earth, right? Which
Yeah.
were molecules, right? Or like he made from atoms, right?
Yeah.
And then we had an atom.
9.
So Adam is, in the Bible, right, created as the first human being. And what if it like if we looked at it more scientifically and God made Adam from the dirt, right? It said it made him from the dirt. Well, what if the dirt is the smallest particle that people could perceive when the Bible was written? They couldn't perceive the idea of an atom because it didn't exist. And so they were like, oh, well, dirt is so small, right? And that's kind of like how it looks like,
Yeah, that's how they
and that's what they can perceive at the moment. And so I sometimes think like science is so correlated with like
Religion and stuff.
religion.
Really,
Even like Jesus said, whenever you pray with your mind and your heart. And now there's
That's like
been
releasing
studies-
energy.
actually,
It's releasing
Exactly.
energy.
Releasing
Well,
signals to
but-
the world.
well, and science has actually found there's neuron cells in the heart too.
Yeah.
So,
And like that, he says, pray with your mind and your heart. They
Yeah.
didn't even, and at the time, they didn't like probably like it wasn't probably known until recent that the heart had neural.
exactly, it wasn't known until recently. And like what Jose's talking about, we talked about that because what I started doing when I was in undergrad, I started looking at the Bible verses in Genesis, the creation of the world, and I started trying to reinterpret them in scientific terms, thinking about like the dirt, for example. I was like, okay, well maybe that could mean atoms because it is the smallest thing. And when we look at an atom, it kind of looks like a piece of dirt. So I'm like, well, maybe that's what they mean by that. And what if, because if God is this omnipotent, omnipresent being, and he is communicating these things to human beings on earth and with metaphors and parables and certain words that they can understand, then maybe that's what God meant by dirt. And so I
Yeah.
started looking deeper and I was like, well, then it says a lot of times in the creation that, and God said, it always said, God said, and then it happened. So what does that mean?
Yeah. And then, if you think
the
about it,
Of God's voice. Because
exactly.
me and Jose talked about, we kind
Oh,
of came together with our ideas of like the vibrations control, like string theory has tiny vibrating strings and vibrations can affect those strings and those strings make up atoms, which make up everything. And so if God's voice has a certain resonance, a certain vibration that affects those strings of string theory and of atoms, then yeah, you would create anything. And so when it says God spoke and then it happened, maybe that's what that means. The resonance vibrations of God's voice created things. And Jose, you can add to that. I know you know some other stuff.
It's so crazy because I mean it's like the science says that the universe is expanding. What also expands when you speak, you create waves that continue moving further and further, right? And so what if when it says in the Bible God spoke was the Big Bang, and like it was the release of energy, because when it says the Bible was the word, or like God was in the midst of nothingness, and then he spoke and they came into existence. And so maybe what if that is just like a big bang of coming out of his mouth, or I don't know, maybe he doesn't have a mouth, I don't know, but like maybe he's just conscious, and like when he thought about it, like it came into being.
My understanding of God has changed as I dove deeper into all of those things in college, and I started to think God is more of this complicated, free-floating consciousness that can create,
that is everywhere and at all places at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you seen the realistic angels, like the biblically accurate angels? How terrifying they are!
Yeah, they're kind of scary.
It's freaking weird. And like you see, like I heard people like with DMT trips that they've seen things like that without even hearing about like biblically accurate angels.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. And even people with near-death
experience. Yeah, in the Amazons,
saw stuff.
A lot of cultures like would take like certain drugs to supposedly connect to like higher levels or like understanding, or like and so what if we really haven't tapped into what those capacities are, and maybe it does actually take you to other like
another realm. It takes your conscious to another dimensions.
Realm. Exactly.
I was thinking about the atom thing. Like if like with like a lot of things, it seems like whenever you zoom in, like it's like kind of like a fractal. Like how an atom, like it's like a center, and there's things revolving around it, like gravity. Like it has its own gravity field, and there's like the neurons are floating around it.
Yeah,
it kind of looks like our solar system in a way.
I was thinking the same thing whenever I saw it. Yeah. And did you know the electrons are on the atom? I learned this in chemistry, that it's an electron cloud. It's not even, the model of an atom isn't even technically an accurate depiction of what an atom actually looks like in reality, because those electrons are moving so quickly. They're like a cloud of electrons.
So what if you zoomed really close into like something like that small, and you saw like a universe? And like whenever you zoom out, our universe is just like a single atom, and like the universe is just a part of another being or another object.
Yeah, I've kind of thought about that, because it makes sense. Like if Adam was taken out of heaven into another, like into Earth, right?
What if it's the dimensions? We're too small to comprehend the bigger things. What if like, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
What if like ascending into another realm just means like being able to perceive something outside of that atom? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what we talked about too. Like we talked about near-death experiences could just be a portal to a higher dimension. Because if God exists outside the fourth dimension of time, then that means God exists outside of time itself. And of course, we can't exist outside time because we're stuck within the fourth dimension of time. So that means anything that exists outside time is going to be automatically eternal. They would automatically be able to see the past, present, future, and everything in between in front of them all at once.
There's just it's crazy.
It would be. Yeah. That's how it would be outside.
Just like we see a 3D map, where you like can see a whole Earth.
Yeah, it's like
in a map, right? And so we can like pinpoint and see like where Africa, where Europe, where the US, like you can see it all at the same time, because it's a 2D like display of the Earth. And so as 3D beings, we can see two-dimensional beings, or like two-dimensional like aspects easily. Yeah,
we can easily comprehend it. So a being like in the fifth dimension could easily comprehend our dimension.
Exactly. Yes. And time, they would see time like a map, but in 3D, because they're at such a higher level. It's not 2D anymore. Now it's 3D that they're seeing all at once.
It's like how we see like if an object existed in 2D, it would be so simple to us. Yes. Like we'd so easily like we could even manipulate it if we wanted to.
Yeah, so that's why I think God, if he is a fifth dimensional being, then he could easily manipulate Earth and the universe, because he's outside. Because just like
he has just such an like understanding of it that it's easy for him to just map it out. Like if I do this, this will happen. We could do that for a two-dimensional thing, because there's only a certain amount of ways that they could go. There's only amount of like a 2D dimension has a lot less possibilities than a 3D dimension.
Right.
What if there's what if God has a God? What if there's he's the 5th dimensional being and there's just an 8th dimensional being?
Yeah, because there's up to like 11 or 10 dimensions, I believe, with string theory. So
it's crazy.
Yeah.
What if the gods have a religion? They have their own god, and then those gods have their own religions.
Now we're getting crazy.
Yeah.
and then they live in the Bermuda Triangle.
Whoa. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, I think we can wrap it up at this point. Thank you everyone for listening. Let us know what you thought was interesting. What were your thoughts about what we talked about in regards to IQ, about theories that are going on, conspiracy theories. Just we would really like to know what really impacted you, and also give us a like if you really enjoy this content, and also subscribe to our channel because we're creating weekly content here on our podcast, and also starting to create some shorter content for you guys on TikTok, Instagram, and our other platforms as well. So please follow us in those. And also thank you, James, for coming along. I think
of course.
We really enjoyed having you on the podcast and kind of thinking through all these like really interesting thoughts, you know.
Yeah, you could say they were outside of the box. So
they are definitely
out of the
box. Certainly. Yes, well, thank you everyone, and we hope that you have a good one, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.